Most people believe financial stress disappears once income increases. That idea sounds logical. More money should create stability, more breathing room, less anxiety. That's what almost everyone expects. But something strange often happens instead. People earn more, while still feeling trapped underneath the surface. Not always the exact same pressure, but a different version of it. A larger apartment, a larger payment, a larger lifestyle, a larger structure requiring continuous maintenance, and eventually many people realize something uncomfortable. Their income increased, but their freedom didn't increase the same way. This is Streetwise Wealth Academy. I'm Winston, your synthetic financial educator. This content is educational commentary only and is not personalized financial advice, so always research financial decisions carefully. One of the biggest misconceptions about money is believing income alone creates peace. Income matters enormously. That's important to say clearly. Limited income creates real pressure, real constraints, real instability. But higher income and emotional stability are not automatically the same thing, because stress is not purely mathematical. Stress is also structural, behavioral, psychological, and emotional. Now this becomes easier to understand once recurring obligations begin expanding alongside income. A person earns more money, then gradually upgrades life around that income level. A nicer apartment, a newer vehicle, more subscriptions, more convenience, more recurring commitments operating quietly underneath daily life. And individually, many of those upgrades genuinely seem reasonable. That's the important part. Lifestyle expansion rarely feels reckless while it's happening. It usually feels deserved, responsible, normal. Now, this does not mean improving quality of life is bad. Comfort matters, convenience matters, enjoying life matters. The deeper issue is what happens once upgraded living becomes emotionally permanent. Because expectations quietly shape financial behavior underneath awareness, and human beings adapt to improved conditions extremely quickly psychologically. What initially feels luxurious, eventually feels standard. What initially feels exciting, eventually feels emotionally normal. And once something feels normal, losing it later often feels emotionally threatening. That changes behavior quietly underneath the surface. Now, another important factor here is recurring obligations. Because higher income often creates larger recurring structures, higher rent, higher car payments, more financing, more subscriptions, more systems requiring continuous maintenance. And once enough obligations accumulate simultaneously, future income begins arriving already partially committed before the paycheck even appears. That changes emotional experience significantly. Now, flexibility matters more than many people initially realize because flexibility affects stress, recovery ability, risk tolerance, emotional stability, future decision-making itself. A person with fewer recurring obligations can usually tolerate uncertainty more calmly. But once obligations expand far enough, continuity itself becomes emotionally critical. Maintaining the structure, maintaining the lifestyle, maintaining the appearance of stability, and once maintaining continuity becomes the emotional priority, stress often remains surprisingly persistent underneath the surface. Now, another important reason higher income does not automatically reduce stress is because complexity itself creates pressure. Larger structures require more maintenance, more payments, more coordination, more attention, more management operating continuously underneath daily life. And over time, structural complexity quietly consumes emotional bandwidth. That matters because financial stress is not only about money itself. It is also about how much mental energy the structure surrounding life continuously requires. Now, another important layer here involves visibility, because people usually compare income visibly, while comparing obligations invisibly. Someone sees the nicer car, the upgraded apartment, the visible lifestyle improvements, but they rarely see the recurring payments, the pressure, the dependency on uninterrupted income flow underneath the surface. That invisibility creates distorted assumptions about financial stability. Now, another important factor here is social normalization. Modern culture strongly associates upgraded living with success. A higher income often creates pressure to visibly level up, not always consciously, but psychologically. Advertising reinforces it. Social media reinforces it. Consumer culture reinforces it constantly, and repeated exposure quietly changes emotional expectations over time. Now eventually, upgraded living stops feeling optional emotionally. It simply begins feeling normal. And once expectations normalize upward, people often stop evaluating whether the larger structure is actually increasing long-term stability. Now another important layer appears once uncertainty enters the picture. Because uncertainty feels very different once obligations become large enough. A smaller structure can usually absorb disruption more calmly, but larger recurring systems often create narrower emotional margins underneath the surface. A missed paycheck feels heavier. A medical bill feels heavier. An unexpected expense feels heavier. Not necessarily because the event itself changed, because the structure surrounding the event became less flexible over time. Now this does not happen because people are irresponsible. Modern financial systems increasingly encourage expansion. Bigger lifestyles, more convenience, more financing, more recurring engagement, and repeated engagement becomes highly profitable structurally. Again, this is not about conspiracy, it's about incentives. Systems naturally evolve toward repeatable patterns because repeatable systems reduce uncertainty. But repeatable obligations also quietly increase structural dependency over time. Now another important factor here is emotional comparison. Because many people believe financial success should feel a certain way emotionally. Less stress, more freedom, more peace. So when income rises, but pressure remains, people often become confused. They assume something must be wrong with them personally. But emotional stability is not created by income alone. It is heavily shaped by structure. Now another important factor here is speed. Modern financial environments move extremely quickly. Payments happen automatically. Subscriptions renew invisibly. Purchases happen instantly. Convenience arrives immediately. And fast-moving systems naturally reduce reflection. That matters because reflection creates awareness. Without awareness, structural expansion often becomes normalized automatically underneath the surface. Now, another important reason income increases do not always reduce stress is because modern culture often teaches people how to increase lifestyle before teaching them how to preserve flexibility. Visible success gets rewarded socially, but flexibility is mostly invisible. Nobody sees breathing room. Nobody sees reduced obligations. Nobody sees optionality, which means many people unconsciously optimize for visible improvement, while quietly reducing long-term flexibility underneath the surface. Now, eventually, this creates something emotionally confusing. A person can earn more than they ever imagined, while still feeling trapped by the size and complexity of the structure surrounding everyday life. Not because income failed to increase, but because the structure expanded alongside it. Now, this does not mean higher income is meaningless. Far from it. Income creates opportunity, flexibility, stability potential. The deeper issue is understanding that income and freedom are not automatically identical, because freedom is heavily influenced by structural flexibility underneath the surface. Now, if you step back and observe the broader pattern, something important becomes very clear. Income increases, lifestyle expands, recurring obligations expand, expectations normalize upward, flexibility quietly narrows underneath the surface. And eventually maintaining the structure itself often becomes emotionally exhausting, which means financial stress is not always caused by lack of income alone. Sometimes it is caused by the size and complexity of the structure surrounding modern life itself. Now, understanding this should not create guilt. Guilt rarely improves clarity. The goal is awareness, because awareness changes observation. Instead of viewing financial stress purely through income levels, you begin noticing larger systems operating underneath behavior. Expectation systems, normalization systems, recurring obligation systems, lifestyle expansion systems. And once those systems become visible, financial life often starts making more sense structurally. Not instantly, not perfectly, but progressively. Because invisible systems are usually the hardest systems to evaluate clearly. Not because they are unbeatable, but because people stop recognizing how often those systems quietly shape emotional pressure underneath everyday life. Now, financial life is rarely shaped by one dramatic decision. It is usually shaped through repeated systems operating quietly across time. Small upgrades, small recurring obligations, small normalized expectations accumulating gradually underneath awareness. And once those patterns become visible, many people begin realizing something important. More income alone does not automatically create peace, because peace is not only about how much money enters the system, it is also about how much pressure the structure surrounding that system continuously creates underneath the surface. And understanding that changes how financial stability itself gets interpreted moving forward, less emotionally, more structurally, more clearly. Because many people are not financially stressed simply because they earn too little. Often they are navigating increasingly complex structures they were never properly taught to recognize clearly. That concludes today's lesson. Peace. If this lesson helped you see money a little differently, then stay with the series. Because financial understanding is not built from one idea. It is built layer by layer. One system, one pattern, one hidden behavior at a time. This first month is focused on the financial lessons many adults were never properly taught growing up. How money moves, how debt works, how stress builds, how behavior gets shaped, and how modern financial systems quietly influence everyday life. So watch the next lesson when you're ready, and keep building the foundation. This is Streetwise Wealth Academy. I'm Winston. Peace.